Hello and a very warm welcome to Insight. I'm Aman Agarwal. Raghuram Rajan has taken over as the 23rd Governor of the Reserve Bank of India at a time when the economy is faced with a big crisis. Today in Insight, we discuss the challenges before the new RBI Governor and whether or not he can rescue the economy. And to discuss the same, we have with us in our studios, as always, three distinguished guests. Please welcome Professor Aman Agarwal, who's the Vice Chairman of the Indian Institute of Finance. Welcome to Insight, Professor Agarwal. Sitting next to him is Ashok Dasgupta, Senior Journalist, Deputy Editor, The Hindu. Welcome to Insight, Mr. Dasgupta. And we're also joined by another Senior Journalist, Shantanu Guhare, who's India Editor of the Central European News. Welcome to Insight. Mr. Guhare, I'd like to begin with you. Sure. There's a lot of excitement, a lot of euphoria with the new RBI governor taking over. What explains this euphoria, this excitement? Is this because we understand he has a formidable reputation, but what explains this euphoria?
Well, I think Raghuram Rajan, who is the 23rd governor of Reserve Bank, he has been talking about the economy for quite some time. There has been a serious miscommunication between the finance minister, P. Chidambaram, and the previous governor, Duvuri Subbarao, over a host of issues. Some of them were very contentious that involved the banking process and the banking licenses. I think Mr. Raghuram Rajan's coming in has created a buzz in the markets because he is actually communicating for the first time what the government wants or what the government expects from the market. This line of communication has always been closed in the last couple of months, and that's where the problem arose. He's not come with a magic wand. He's not the Pied Piper of the Dalal Street. He has just walked into a challenging role, which many feel he will be able to execute because he understands the current context and he understands the current situation in the market. The Indian markets are down because no investments are coming up. Infrastructure projects are stuck. There's a huge problem in terms of exports and imports. Current account deficit is a major bone of crisis. So the markets needs to be perked up. And of course, there is rupee, which is having severe pressure against the dollar. Obviously, now the rupee has slowly gained, and he has made a few statements which anyone else could have made, but they never made, including the NRI cash to be brought back, the pressure on the banks to pick up money from defaulting, the NPAs, that needs to be resolved. So I think he has brought in a bit of freshness, and he has communicated to the market that he wants certain changes to happen. I think it's as simple as that. But let us not presume that because of his sweet words, he will be able to wave the magic wand. He doesn't have a magic wand, but he understands the market, and he has made it very clear that he wants certain changes to take place.
Right, and he will tackle them one at a time.
There's absolutely, he's very clear on that.
Right, in fact, the markets have also cheered his entry. The rupee responded well, the stocks responded well, picking up from the previous day's lows. Mr. Dasgupta, how do you look at Mr. Rajan taking over? Never before a change of guard in the RBI has been so closely watched. What makes it so special this time? Is it because of the personality and profile of Mr. Rajan, or is it because of the current economic crisis that we're going through?
Well, it's the second, what you said. Since the crisis was so grave, a change of guard has made big news, and his 7-page statement of what he intends to do during, let's say, his 3-year tenure also excited the markets, and the stock market and the currency market acted accordingly. But let's go back to what Raghuram Rajan was. Apart from being a great economist, he also predicted way back in 2005 the financial crisis that is going to erupt in 2008. When he propounded his theory at that point of time, people poo-pooed him. But he has actually come true. And since he could foresee the crisis coming, I also expect that he also has solutions to coming out from this crisis.
Right.
Now, having said that, the major point, much of what he has said I would say was work in progress. But the statement came from the new governor, and which made very good sense. Things like the bond coming in, they were dilly-dallying on whether they should do it. Now, some analysts think that it should have come much before. Then probably the rupee wouldn't have depreciated to this level. Then this talk about NPAs. The person he has put in charge to look after NPAs is a very no-nonsense, straightforward person.
Right.
So the corporates will now be wary that there's no point in dilly-dallying in payments. The other thing is that whenever you are managing the economy, it has to be in tandem. That is, the monetary authorities' policies should be in tandem with the government's fiscal policies.
Right.
Now, during Subbarao's term, I mean, it's his misfortune that during his entire 5 years, he has been moving from one crisis to the other, and the crisis has been deepening. But most of the time, it was seeing that the RBI, having done its part, gave also signals and indications that now it is time for the government to do its part.
Right.
But that never came. So it cannot be just a monetary policy which does the management of the economy.
Right.
Now, Raghuram Rajan is said to be a man of very few words. I mean, it's surprising, and that also was surprising, that he came out with a 7-page statement. The governor, Subbarao, former governor, he also used to be finance secretary. He had worked in the finance ministry. But the statements that he would make in his midterm review, he would try to explain why such a step is being taken and what are the problems. No, it is good being transparent, but to be very transparent in monetary management also creates problems, especially
but Dr.
when
Rajan
the government
has also stressed on
is not going
transparency
along
and
with it.
predictability. Dr. Rajan has also stressed on transparency and predictability.
He has, but he has not gone to the extent of saying that the government has not acted on these fronts.
Okay.
This was very clearly articulated by the former governor. Dr. Rajan has merely stated that this is what I intend to do, and he has made it easy for banks to mop up funds. He has ensured through bonds that dollar inflows come in. He has also talked about financial inclusion, the unbanked areas, and liberalizing the opening up of branches. He has talked about it. Now, what he has talked about, which is probably a longer term, is that the rupee becomes such a currency which it becomes tradable, in the sense you don't have to go in for foreign exchange dollars or euros. It is the rupee that people, investors plow back in. So all in all, it has been a very welcome and fresh development, and the market and currency market have accordingly reacted. But now one will have to wait and see whether he is actually able to walk the talk.
Okay. All right. Professor Agarwal, we'll discuss the challenges that are ahead of the new RBI governor and the things that he has promised. But what do you make of all the excitement and the media gushing over his appointment?
No, the thing is that he has to prove whether he'll be a Pooth or a Kapooth for this nation, where he has laid his birth, his education, and moved up to the next level of his professional career, which he based in the United States. Now, whether the rupee goes down to 75 in the next 3 weeks, or it comes towards 45 or 35 rupees, the movement will show whether he is going to serve as a Kapooth or a Pooth of this nation, be a son of this nation, or a person who is not going to be a son of this nation.
But he has been likened to James Bond by the media.
James Bond is a different role altogether, and he is nothing in comparison to what he does and what James Bond does. The other thing is that the challenges we will discuss later, but I think it is a little too much overrated in terms of what is getting to be expected of him, or what he is expected to do. He is expected to do a normal functionality of a central banker, trying to see certain parameters which must be within those bands which the central bank has set for it to go for the economy to grow further, in tandem with other ministries which have to work along with the Reserve Bank to bring the economy on its track. There is nothing new which is there for him, because he has served as a chief economist for the International Monetary Fund, where most central banks around the world and central bankers would come to him for problems and solutions at the IMF. And he has got to see most of these problems which are emerging in a developing country like India to be faced there. So it is not something which is new for him. He has already gone through it, he's seen it, and some of the solutions he's acted upon, being at the IMF, through the IMF in various countries, and seen what kind of responses come through. He's now got to play the real role of being a governor and getting it active. As I said again, now it is for him to decide whether he wants to take the country down by letting the rupee fall down to 75 and 80 rupees and strengthen the US dollar and the US economy, or make the Indian rupee strengthen itself in a normal process to about 45 or 35 rupees and make this country more stronger and proud of what he has done for this country as a service, as a payment towards what this country has given him in his first 25-30 years of his career. So, you know, that is where it comes up. We'll discuss the challenges. Another thing I'd like to highlight is that there is a lot of misquotation in terms of his being the predictor of the financial crisis since the beginning, where most newspapers I have been reading since yesterday talking about him being the predictor. Way back in January 2004, Professor J.D. Agarwal, who was the chairman of Indian Institute of Finance, he gave a keynote address in Chile at a university conference there, which was sponsored by IMF and various other international agencies, where he projected the oil to go beyond $45 a barrel, where it was only $16 or $18 a barrel at that time, and then other effects of crisis seeping in, including the NPA roar, which would be there worldwide. So, and it was much before even Soros or even Raghuram Rajan came out with the fact. So, you know, there are various other facts which need to be looked upon, instead of overrating Raghuram and making him, you know, too proud of himself, and then he doesn't act on his chair. I think we need to let him do his business, his job, understand what he's supposed to do and function.
All right, we'll discuss some of the measures that he announced and also whether or not he'd be able to live up to what he has promised when we return from this quick break. Stay with us.
ओ माय गॉड, अधेड़ उम्र के पड़ोसी ने एक बच्चे का यौन शोषण किया।
समाज में हो क्या रहा है?
अनुज, अनुज आजा। रुक जाओ बेटे।
द प्रोटेक्शन ऑफ चिल्ड्रन फ्रॉम सेक्सुअल ऑफेंसेस एक्ट 2012 के अनुसार बच्चों के साथ यौन शोषण करना कानूनी अपराध है।
सपनों के घर बसाने की हिचकिचाहट को अब छुट्टी कीजिए। इलाहाबाद बैंक आशियाना होम लोन्स। समय है सेलिब्रेशन का।
नीचे काकी, घर में शौचालय कहाँ है? बहू को
घर में कहाँ, खुले में ही जाना पड़ेगा।
फिर तो तुम घूंघट भी खोल ही दो। एक तरफ तो आपको बहू का घूंघट भी सरकाना गवारा नहीं, और दूसरी तरफ उससे खुले में।
इस तरह तो हमने कभी सोचा ही नहीं था।
तो अब सोचो, घर में शौचालय बनवाओ और इस्तेमाल करो।
शुरू करें निर्मल भारत अभियान।
जहाँ सोच वहाँ शौचालय।
Left parties, they are losing their ground in West Bengal, but the story is not same there in Kerala. Why?
Normally in Kerala, backward classes and scheduled caste is the backbone of CPM.
Yes.
Now they have changed their mind. They are coming to Congress side.
Mamata Banerjee, I guess, is very aggressive. I compare Mamata Banerjee with any other leader, Congress leader there in Kerala.
Kerala also entirely different, because Mamata's style is different. Kerala, our Congress party style is entirely different.
There was some issue related with caste certificate you have provided. What was that?
So last 4 election, I have the same caste certificate I have submitted to returning officer. That time they have not challenged.
Okay.
So this time I don't know.
Rajiv Mishra in talks with Minister of State, Labour and Employment, Mr. K. Suresh. Watch Special Guest on Saturday, 7 September at 8 p.m. only on Lok Sabha television.
500 लोग आ रहे हैं शादी में,
तो हम लोग 700 लोग का खाना बनवाएंगे।
लड़की की कुंडली में दोष दिख रहा है।
कैसा दोष पंडित जी?
अन्न का दोष।
क्या मतलब?
लड़की की शादी में अन्न की बर्बादी होगी, जिससे अन्न देवता नाराज हो जाएंगे। एक उपाय है, बारातियों के खाने का इंतजाम जरूरत के हिसाब से करें, फिर भी भोजन बच जाए तो गरीबों में बांट दें।
धरती पर उगे अन्न पर सबका अधिकार है,
इसे व्यर्थ न जाने दें।
किसी का अधिकार न छीनें।
जागो ग्राहक जागो।
क्या हुआ बेटा? उन्होंने मुझे
बच्चे और उनके माता पिता बाल यौन उत्पीड़न के प्रति सजग हों तो अनिष्ट से बचा जा सकता है। बाल यौन अपराध से सुरक्षा अधिनियम 2012 के तहत अपराधी को सख्त सजा देने का प्रावधान है।
Welcome back to Insight. We are discussing challenges before Dr. Raghuram Rajan as the new RBI governor. Mr. Guhare, a lot has been written about Dr. Rajan, his background, and what is he expected to do. But what would be the foremost challenge before him, according to you? Would it be, arresting the decline of the rupee, or you think it's going to be balancing inflation versus growth?
Well, I think the first and foremost, he has to handle the rupee. The rupee is indeed in crisis. It has tanked about 18%. The government has to do something. And Raghuram Rajan, being the governor of RBI, he has to move in and do some corrective measures. It could be hypothetical, but in the last 48 hours, the rupee has slightly stabilized. And there are chances that he will take a few more measures that could probably help the rupee stabilize. Now, what those measures could be? There's already a buzz that he could hike a little interest rate like the way Brazil and other countries have done, but then that will impact our corporate sector. People may not like it. It will have an adverse impact on the market. So he will tinker with some interest rates, at least definitely. I have a feeling he will definitely do that.
Okay.
There are issues that he might try and see what could be done possibly to push up this huge decline in the manufacturing base that has happened. He will definitely look at gold, which is a problem zone. I mean, I think our penchant for this yellow metal has been going on and is becoming a problem. And a few fiscal policies he will take care of. But the euphoria that, as Professor Agarwal and Mr. Dasgupta rightly said, the euphoria will die very soon and the market will expect him to perform. So definitely he has to look at the banking sector, the rupee. He also has to try and look at the banking sector very seriously,
right?
Because there are huge NPAs and the Indian banking system itself is reeling, and on a parallel level there are private companies which want to get into the banking sector. So he has his plate full, but yes, rupee he has to take care immediately, and I somehow get a feeling that he would be able to do it. He should be able to push in a few measures so that the rupee stabilizes. Once that happens, maybe he will be able to gain a bit of confidence from the market and try and push in some of his other measures.
Okay, Mr. Dasgupta, one of the things that Dr. Raghuram Rajan said in his press conference was that the primary role of the central bank is monetary stability. What does it tell us about his stance, particularly about...
That is what any RBI governor would say, because among the three objectives, these are the primary ones: currency management, inflation control, and monetary stability.
Right.
Okay. Now, Raghuram Rajan doesn't have anything to do with the fiscal policies. That is for the government.
Right.
But whatever is necessary, fiscal policy along with structural reforms, that the government has to perform. Now, I expect that now that will happen because, you know, the day before Rajan actually left Finance Ministry, he had a huge briefing with the Finance Minister. So I think they have some plans chalked out. But going back on what Rajan would probably do, I mean, he has stated what he would do probably in the short term, the medium term, and the longer term. You know, making the rupee more tradable is a longer term thing because you have to convince people. Now, leaving that apart, for the short term, immediate near term, obviously, as Guhara pointed out, it will be to stabilize the rupee. For the longer term, would be, you know, bring in such changes that you can effectively control inflation. Because at the end of the day, you'll see that even the current crisis originated from the government not being able to control inflation.
Mr. Dasgupta will speak about inflation in greater detail, but you know, if we could look at some of the specifics, he talks about swapping dollar deposits at a lower cost with the RBI, and he's talking about a special window for doing it, incentivizing banks to do it. To what extent is it going to help the rupee?
These will bring in dollar inflows. But then, you know, these positive statements and opening up statements do create a sense of confidence. And it is actually the rupee has overshot, you know, it has been devalued because of speculation, punting and all that stuff. The real value of the rupee, you know, by various estimates is anything between 57, 58 to 60, 61. Beyond that, it is a huge depreciation. But currently, if it even comes down to around 63, 64, people will be very happy that, you know, it has appreciated to a large extent.
Right.
Now, among other things, apart from, you know, these dollar inflows, the various facility windows that he has tried to open up, one important thing that he has talked about is the inflation indexed bonds connected to the CPI, Consumer Price Index, and not the wholesale price index. You know, the earlier similar bonds which were floated in June were connected to the wholesale price index. Now, for the consumer, the wholesale price index has lost its meaning.
Right.
The moment he indexed it to the CPI, I think that people will move away from investing in gold to these bonds, because after all, household savings, they're looking for positive returns. They're not looking for speculative profits. They moved away to gold because they were getting negative returns both in the equity market as well as the fixed term deposit market. So the inflation, changing the basket from WPI to CPI is a major step. And also remember that I think we are among the few or the only country that we still go by the WPI. All other countries go by the CPI because that is what affects the retail consumer.
Right. So that will protect the households from the impact of inflation. But Professor Agarwal, the foremost challenge clearly is going to be recovery of rupee before the new RBI government.
Yes, the recovery, not only just recovery, the strengthening of a rupee is going to be the most important component, which will automatically counter inflation because of the import bills we have, or because of oil and other food items which we import, which constitute almost about 70 to 80% of the total import bills. So given that, the rupee appreciating would be one of the major considerations. You know, just a little bit appreciation seems like you have a sales in the market where an X product is made double X, and then you give 30-40% discount and you say, oh look, I have given you a good value for money. That is not something which the country is looking forward to. The second thing which he has, and he has already taken steps, is to develop and re-establish the international acceptability, and which comes with his position himself as the governor and the way he enjoyed the reputation internationally, and the steps, some of his steps which he have already introduced yesterday in terms of rollbacks and things, which will bring that international acceptability. The third component, which in my opinion would be is the NPA management. He will discipline the banking framework. The NPA is not only an issue in India, but it's an issue in the US and Europe as well. The problem, which is still persisting for the last 8 years now, from 2005 onwards, when the NPA issue became a big bubble in the US and Europe, has still not been resolved by banks internationally and within the country as well. As a result, and that is why we are still facing this crisis hovering all over the world and not being resolved till date. The banks in the past, in the 70s, 80s and 90s, followed a policy of sit back and wait for profits to be earned to do away with the NPAs which have been generated in their past balance sheets, which will not work in this scenario because it's overall not one country but major country scenarios worldwide. So I think this is one factor which he will majorly focus on in terms of resolving this NPA and making the banking sector more efficient. And the last component, which in my opinion would be to control the money supply, the M3. The M3 in India is ideally supposed to be roughly about 13%. It has moved up to 16 to 17% in the last 2-3 years. It rolled back to about 13% after moving to 18% a couple of years back, but in the last 2 years it has gone back to 16-17%, which is fairly very high. So he needs to keep a check on the money supply and see that there is no more seigniorage money which is created in the economy, which will further bubble up the inflation factor even if the rupee goes stronger. So that's where these are the, I think, 3 or 4 components which I feel he will focus, and where I read his speech as well, are circled around some of these factors which have come out yesterday.
Right, his speech clearly sets the tone for days to come and the challenges that lie before him. He clearly is going to have his task cut out. On that note, we take a break in the program. Stay with us, we'll be right back.
चेहरा पढ़ूं यहाँ दोनों बोले एक ही बात, गर्भ से हो अंतर्यामी, जच्चा बच्चा की सुरक्षा पति पत्नी दोनों के हाथ, स्वास्थ्य केंद्र में जांच कराया, जच्चा बच्चा कार्ड बनाया, आयरन की गोली 100 दिनों तक, अतिरिक्त आहार खिलाना, प्रसव अस्पताल में ही कराना।
कुछ जानी पहचानी सी लगे है इनकी भाषा।
क्यों ना हो भैया, मैं हूँ गाँव की आशा।
स्वास्थ्य केंद्र जाएं, जननी सुरक्षा योजना में पंजीकरण कराएं, सुरक्षित प्रसव और आर्थिक सहायता दोनों पाएं।
सॉरी
पापा।
हाँ बेटा।
थैंक्स
किस लिए?
मेरे नए कंप्यूटर के लिए।
कंप्यूटर?
हाँ, अब आप गाड़ी 45 से 55 किलोमीटर की स्पीड पे चला रहे हो, जिससे हम हर साल अपने फ्यूल बिल पे 25,000 तक बचाएंगे। मतलब रिया का नया कंप्यूटर पक्का। बात तो एक ही है ना।
45 से 55 की स्पीड पे गाड़ी चलाएं और सालाना 25,000 रूपए तक बचाएं। ब्रॉट टू यू बाय PCRA इन पब्लिक इंटरेस्ट।
क्यों आप समझते हैं कि MPs को, सांसदों पे आरोप लगाने की किसी को राइट नहीं है, या उनको कुछ कहने का किसी को राइट नहीं है?
नहीं, सांसद पे आरोप लग सकता है, लेकिन संसद पे नहीं लगना चाहिए। आपने देखा था कि लगातार अभी जिनके खिलाफ मैंने प्रिविलेज मूव किया था, खुद उनकी पत्नी ने मुंबई में उनके खिलाफ मुकदमा किया। ओमपुरी जी, क्या नाम था। तो अगर वो अपनी पत्नी को संतुष्ट नहीं रख पा रहे हैं और वो आदमी कहे कि पार्लियामेंट चोरों का, डकैतों का और उन लोगों का, रास्कल लोगों का अड्डा है, तो जगदम्बिका पाल जैसे लोगों को दर्द नहीं होगा।
Watch Know Your MP Friday 8:30 PM.
श्यामू, देखो फिर आ रहा है, नया टीवी मांगेगा। मैं निकलता हूँ, तू टाल दियो।
जरा रुकिए।
हाँ बोलिए।
ये देखिए कंज्यूमर कोर्ट का फैसला।
ये कागज किसी और को दिखाना, इससे कुछ नहीं होगा।
आप जरूर होगा। अदालत का आदेश ना मानने पर तुम्हारे खिलाफ वारंट जारी हो सकता है।
तो क्या?
तो तुम्हें 3 वर्ष तक का कारावास या 10,000 रूपए तक का जुर्माना या दोनों हो सकते हैं। समझे?
समझ गया।
जागो ग्राहक जागो।
जरा देख के बताइए, हमारे खाते में कितने पैसे जमा हुए?
ये वाले 500 मिलाकर पूरे 10,000।
और मेरे खाते में
पूरे 8,000।
हमारे अचार व पापड़ों की मांग बाजार में बढ़ रही है।
हम सबको मिलकर एक बंद मुट्ठी की तरह काम करना होगा।
हैप्पी बर्थडे जी।
अब दुनिया हमारी है।
Welcome back to Insight. We are discussing the challenges before the new RBI governor at a time when the economy is battling a slowdown and the rupee is depreciating. Mr. Guhare, what do you think would be the new RBI governor's position on monetary policy? What will be his stance relating to interest rates? Will he take a different line from his predecessor?
I believe that he has to look at the interest rates, but there will be obviously pressures on him not to hike it. But I mean, is there an alternative? He doesn't have an alternative also. But he hopes to reduce the current account deficit. Hopefully, if this new window on the dollar, the banks can borrow more in dollars, and some kind of inflow from abroad, the NRI inflow, that could be, there people are saying that it could be up to $8 or $9 billion something. If some substantial money comes in, the CAD could be handled a bit. Okay, that's just one phase of it. He has obviously delayed the September 18 meeting of the monetary policy.
Right.
He has shifted it 20th. Keeping in mind the US federal meetings, he's hoping.
But that would add to the pressure on the rupee.
Well, he's hoping, let's see what decisions they take and what happens there. So obviously he's taking his steps one after another. Now let's come down to the overall scenario of the country and the way he has to look at it. He is not supposed to solve the country's economic problem. That's the job of the minister, that's the job of the government. But if July, August, with this heavy, robust rains, pushes in more farm products in the market and prices come down, he will have an easing off situation for him.
Right.
These are all hypothetical, obviously, because he's just gone into his seat, and as we were discussing in the break, he may not have even shifted to Mumbai. So he's going to settle down in his seat. Now, beyond that, I really don't know what possibly he would do.
Okay.
But I think these are few aspects he would try to take a look over the next 2 or 3 weeks and then see where it goes. The September 20th meeting of the monetary policy is very important, and he will sincerely hope a large chunk of the NRI money that was supposed to come in anyway, it got delayed because of bureaucratic hassles. It should start coming in, and if it comes in a fairly decent number before Diwali, hopefully he would be able to show the market what it happens. I mean, he will be able to show the market that some changes he has been able to bring about. Then he has a huge list of things he has to do, but upfront, these are a couple of things which I expect him to do, or I expect, or even the government expects him to do. And if he can manage this much, hopefully the rupee will continue to remain in a stabilized zone, and we will see more stabilizing of the Indian currency. That would definitely be a good news for the investors, for the common man as well.
Okay. Mr. Das Gupta, do you think he'd be more inclined to cut rates than his predecessor? Because risks to the economy remain when we look at global factors, US tapering off, quantitative easing, and also it's almost certain now that US will carry out military strikes on Syria.
Well, that we'll have to wait and see. The very fact that he has moved the meeting to September 20th to assess what the US Fed does, that itself is a big move away from previous policies. I don't remember ever earlier that, timing it with the US Fed's meeting, any Reserve Bank governor has delayed the meeting to assess what would be the fallout and then decide accordingly. Now, that itself is a very fresh move. The second thing is, whatever steps that he has announced and will be taking, to my mind, these will be the immediate, urgent, short-term measures.
Okay.
Finally, it will be the government that will have to take charge. You talk about CAD, widening CAD. Apart from, our oil imports are fixed, 80% imports, etc. The other components that have added to the CAD because of high imports, coal, gold, etc., are unnecessary to a large extent. We have a penchant for gold, no doubt, But beyond that, gold imports have doubled because people have started speculating and investing in gold.
Right.
Now, that has to be weaned away. Now, one could be the bonds if they are successful. The other thing is that the government will have to bring in structural reforms and incentives in such a way that our exports go up. Now, it's unfortunate that the external environment was also very adverse, which added to our domestic problems and aggravated the situation further. But hoping that there is recovery in the Eurozone, in the US, which is why, you know, the US Fed's decision becomes important, whether they'll be tapering off. Now, if a recovery does take place there, our exports automatically should see a sort of recovery, because discretional spending by the US and Eurozone will rise, and our exports will start moving up.
Right.
Beyond that also, see that our iron ore exports are almost totally stopped.
Right.
Now, a decision will have to be taken by the government. The RBI has nothing to do with it.
Okay.
So once iron export or exports start, a lot of foreign exchange can come in, which has been a steady inflow, you know, this particular sector. So overall, if our export sector does well and the CAD is bridged, there will be enough inflows coming in to finance the CAD without touching your reserves. In the meantime, the RBI will take the measures that are necessary, but both the government and the RBI will have to ensure that inflation is brought under control, because that is the starting point for all the evils that come in.
Professor Agarwal, so clearly some of the things that he has promised are within the ambit of the RBI, but many are well outside the realm of the central bank.
You see, Raghuram has had, unlike the other predecessors, he has had a wide exposure in terms of not only serving an international agency, but also serving the government of India in different capacities. Initially introduced as an advisor to the Prime Minister, then as a chief economic advisor, then, you know, he knows what is happening from both sides. Most governors certainly have come from the secretariat, but they were bureaucratic in nature.
And
so
he's seen as somebody who can communicate well.
Yes, so he has been able to grasp and understand these different people which formulate the government currently and take their mission and the mission of the central bank forward together. An important component which I don't know if these people have understood is that he is a strong believer of autonomy, which he also talked yesterday. And that is one reason for which he left the IMF as a chief economist and went back as a professor, because as professors we enjoy a lot of autonomy, and he has been a strong believer. So he would certainly keep a tandem between what the ministry and the government want in terms of flows, in terms of requirements, keeping the fact that elections are due soon. The policies which are prescribed have to be in tandem with what the government wants and what the RBI's interest is in. So there would be no random policies which can actually break that tandem in force. That is one thing which is very important to be kept in mind. As far as the interest rates and other things are concerned, I believe he would keep them stagnant. He would not move it up or down, but he will try and regulate to control the money supply through other means and let the rupee strengthen through other means which he may adopt in due course in the next 2-3 weeks. One more thing which I have read in the newspaper, thinking in terms of the Fed structure, there has been a lot of Fed influence from the US in the last 2-3 months, where everything through the newspapers, I don't know if it isn't real, but at least through the newspapers it comes out that there's a lot of influence, and the Reserve Bank of India governor is in a direct contact, like Mrs. Indira Gandhi and Margaret Thatcher used to be over the phone when they were prime ministers, trying to know what is happening. India is a very small economy from the US perspective, and they does not give a challenge to the US dollar per se. But for us, we have some role to play, because about 45% of the exports and imports come actually through the US. So from that perspective, US does become important, but not that relevant. In my opinion, he needs some time to understand his office, what we are going through, sit with his people and other people he is going to appoint as advisors to the Reserve Bank, and come to know what could be the steps taken before he holds a formal meeting and gives a signal to the market saying this is what we plan to do in the next short-term measure in the next 1.5 months, 2 months, to bring back India to the same rolling phase we are. We should not forget there is no negative factor which India is going through in the last 2 or 3 years, which has been observed worldwide. Our GDP less, but going still on. Our growth in agriculture is still there, the same level. The industrial has never been too much. It has been the same level, and that is majorly because of the parallel economy. Our gold consumption has been the same. Despite the regulations put on, the gold has gone to the black market, as I said in my last interview here as well. If they try to restrict gold, it will go to the unofficial market. It will not go down, because the consumption is by people, not by the government per se, where they can restrict. They can restrict the banks and financial institutions, but not this people of country, who are not sure whether the government will honor its word tomorrow because of the follies which have come in the last 50 years, where they have not got a committed structure which says, if you buy my bond, you need to be sure about your tomorrow. I'm sorry, that kind of credibility the government of India has still yet to begin and build up. That gold is an asset where they can keep with themselves, is a surety for their pension, for their future, or for any kind of uncertainty, and is liquid cash, which can be encashed in the formal market as well as in informal market within the country or even overseas. Now, from that perspective, he needs to coin out policies, and I think this delay of the meeting is from that perspective, where he needs to come out with a more concrete measure which can build upon his credibility, because his first 2 months will build that credibility for within the country, within the corporate sector and the government within the country, and even giving a reflection to the world outside that he means business, and he would turn this country into the real golden bird which the India deserves and has been in the past.
Absolutely, and as he said that he's also ready to take steps that are going to make him unpopular as governor of the RBI, and he also said that governorship of the RBI is not a popularity contest. On that note, it's time for us to take a break in the program. Stay with us, we'll be back with the final segment of the show.
ओफो, गैस खत्म हो गई।
इतनी जल्दी? सिलेंडर तोल कर तो लिया था ना?
हर बार लेती हूँ।
खाली सिलेंडर तोला था?
खाली सिलेंडर?
देखो, सभी सिलेंडरों पर गैस का वजन, खाली सिलेंडर का वजन और कुल वजन छपा होता है। यदि खाली सिलेंडर का वजन छपे हुए वजन से ज्यादा है, तो इसका मतलब सिलेंडर में गैस के साथ पानी मिला हुआ है।
यानी गैस कम?
बिल्कुल, इसीलिए सिलेंडर लेते और देते समय अवश्य तोलना चाहिए।
सही वजन हमारा अधिकार।
जागो ग्राहक जागो।
सपनों के घर बसाने की हिचकिचाहट को अब छुट्टी कीजिए। इलाहाबाद बैंक आशियाना होम लोन्स। समय है सेलिब्रेशन का।
जब महिला के हाथों में आती है शक्ति, तो पूरे समाज की तस्वीर बदलने लगती है।
मैं सरपंच बनी तो मेरी पहली कोशिश यही थी कि गांव का हर बच्चा स्कूल पढ़ने जाएगा, और लड़कियों की पढ़ाई पर मैंने विशेष बल दिया।
उमा देवी के प्रयासों से गांव में पल्स पोलियो कवरेज 100% रहा।
तस्वीर बदल दूंगी गांव की, क्योंकि हौसला है मुझ में।
महिला सशक्तिकरण यानी देश और समाज की तरक्की और सुरक्षा।
Left parties, they are losing their ground in West Bengal, but the story is not same there in Kerala. Why?
Normally in Kerala, backward classes and scheduled caste is the backbone of CPM.
Yes.
Now they have changed their mind. They are coming to Congress side.
Mamata Banerjee, I guess, is very aggressive. I compare Mamata Banerjee with any other leader, Congress leader, there in Kerala.
Kerala is entirely different, because Mamata's style is different. Kerala, our Congress party style is entirely different.
There was some issue related with caste certificate you have provided. What was that?
So last 4 election, I have the same caste certificate I have submitted to returning officer. That time they have not challenged.
Okay.
So this time I don't know.
Rajiv Mishra in talks with Minister of State, Labour and Employment, Mr. K. Suresh. Watch Special Guest on Saturday, 7 September at 8 p.m. only on Lok Sabha television.
माँ, हाँ? आप कुछ भूल रही हो। क्या भूल रही हो? आपने नल नहीं बंद किया। अरे ध्रुव।
क्या दीदी?
तुम कुछ भूल गए।
क्या दीदी?
तुमने जाने से पहले लाइट नहीं ऑफ की।
उतना ही इस्तेमाल करें जितने की आवश्यकता है।
आने वाली पीढ़ी को उनकी सुविधाओं से वंचित न करें।
जागो ग्राहक जागो।
प्रियंका भारती।
हाँ।
ए शारदा विमल हरिया सब इधर आओ। ये प्रियंका बहुत नाम है इनका। अपनी इज्जत और स्वच्छता की खातिर अपने लगन के दूसरे दिन ससुराल छोड़ने की हिम्मत दिखाई और अपने मर्द से शौचालय बनवाने की मांग की।
सुना उसने?
जब सोच और इरादा नेक हो तो सब सुनते हैं, जैसे इसके मर्द ने सुना।
शुरू करें निर्मल भारत अभियान।
आप भी अपने घर में शौचालय बनवाएं और इस्तेमाल करें। जहाँ सोच वहाँ शौचालय।
Welcome back to Insight. We are discussing the challenges before the new RBI governor. Okay, Mr. Das Gupta, I'll continue with you. You know, some of the other announcements that Mr. Raghuram Rajan made, we spoke about, of course, issuing of new bank licenses, talking about protecting households from inflation by issuing inflation index saving certificates. He also talked about SMS-based fund transfers. He talks about mini ATMs by non-bank entities in rural areas. How significant are these steps, according to you?
Well, I would say politically maybe very significant. For the simple reason that the finance ministry over the recent couple of years used to talk about financial inclusion, the unbanked areas, that fact that banks should reach out to these rural people who probably have the money but they do not know where to keep it because they do not have those facilities. Now, he is probably, I won't use the word pandering, but he is looking after the interests of this particular section. And if you take the current year, assuming that because of the good monsoon, we have a very good harvest, much of the growth that we are anticipating is likely to come from the rural segment.
Right.
Now, it is not the urban consumer demand that will propel the growth. This year, it will be the rural growth which will really give a sort of catalytic impact onto the overall growth. Now, that being so, when the people, say October onwards till November, December, etc., that particular quarter, there will be a revival of demand bolstered by the rural demand. And if facilities can be there at that point of time, or obviously it will take time even later, it will do a lot of good. Because connected to this is also the DBT and the Aadhaar card and all those things that get connected. So it is very necessary that it's not only the urban or the tier 1, tier 2 towns that we have banking facilities. It should be there in the remotest of rural villages. Like banking correspondence used to be talked about. I don't know how far it has been successful, but it is very, very necessary. So that aspect he has touched upon.
Okay, Professor Agarwal, there's also been the bigger challenge many would say our economy is faced with is that of a lack of confidence from investors both at home and abroad. Do you think the new RBI governor would succeed on that front?
You see, he can only do in terms of the policy frameworks which he projects for the RBI, in terms of strengthening the rupee, keeping the inflation under control, and giving a way for the government or the ministry to bring in growth for this country. When it comes of international confidence, it is not one figure which is the governor which plays a major role. It is the policy framework which the government has encharted, and where investors internationally can see that they would invest, they would feel secure of their funds, and they would feel secure of making money in the country they enter. And that has been a coin of incidents in the last 1.5 years where the courts have taken certain decisions, they have been abrupt, allocations of certain licenses and resources which have been rolled back, there have been decisions. Now this kind of a mixed path which has been there, then recent decision of which has been rolled back in terms of investment which could be made over. Now there are a large number of these ambits of decisions which have taken place in the last 1.5 years because of the fear of seeping in a contagion effect which was there in Europe and US, where the government and the Reserve Bank have tandemly brought in these. Now from that perspective, it is the government which has to play more role. But as I said, the Reserve Bank of India can certainly ensure that if you have money parked within the banking framework, that would be your money. You can have easy access to it. It will not be logged on. If you want to transfer that money from one zone to the other, it can be done. India's currency is already a reserve currency in various countries. So for Raghuram to talk about having it exchanged is not something new. It's just getting it recognized to that fact. Already in the Arabic region for almost over half a century, the currency has been floating under a different color and now in the same color for the last 10-15 years. If you look at Malaysia, if you look at Mauritius, the Indian currency is already there as a reserve currency. Various other Asian countries have also wanted. Sri Lanka also has Indian currency as a reserve currency. Sri Lanka has an rupee bond which one can buy for an NR Sri Lankan who can actually Indian who can invest in a rupee bond which could be paid. So there is a strong acceptability of the rupee as a currency, which is not something which is bringing out of a new, but the Reserve Bank has never fostered it to become one. And this is what he feels, following the US trend of having a strong reserve currency internationally would help boom up the position, strengthen the rupee, and that's where he's now trying to project in doing so. So there is some kind of confidence can be built up by the governor, but large part of it, when it comes to the international confidence, depends on what the government has in place. Is there a policy framework? Like the yesterday's speech lays down what the RBI intends to do. May not be the same after the next meeting. We will come to know what will be in the short term. But at least some path is available for people, that what is expected by the new governor in terms of his wanting to do, and that will help them discuss, make their plans, whether it is retail, whether it is opening up new banks, whether it is bringing in new businesses, so and so forth. So that's where clarity in thought process is very important, and at least he's trying to do his bit.
Okay, I'll give you the last word, Mr. Guhare. We are out of time. Do you think he'd be able to address this problem of confidence? People have lost confidence in the India story. Do you think he'll be able to bring it back?
As I was reading up on him, he has been talking a lot. Ironically, the RBI governors have never talked. And I think one paper wrote a very interesting piece in the year 2003 when Bimal Jalan actually pushed the baton on. Even the new governor also didn't talk. I think Rajan is persuasive and he's creative and one change what he can actually bring in, he can prod the government to take some pro-people measures. If that happens, things will actually change. We have discussed what possibly is on his plate, but he could be a person pushing the government to try and take a few pro-people measures because there are not too many reformers left in the government now. So he could be seen as that light which many people not connected with the financial world want such changes to happen, and he probably is that person. So if he is successful in doing that and he pushes the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister to take those moves, things will change.
Alright, so whether or not Mr. Raghuram Rajan will live up to all the optimism and euphoria surrounding him taking over as the RBI governor, for that we'll have to wait and watch for some more time. On that note, it's time for me to wrap up the discussion here. I'd like to thank all my guests for coming to the studios. It was a pleasure having you all here. That's it for now in this edition of Insight. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.